A few years ago, I watched this movie about a man who falls into a vat of pickles and gets brined for 100 years and then wakes up to meet his great grandson. It's just a silly sci fi comedy, right? Right? Well, the movie is light and funny and kind of stupid, but it has a ton of Jewish references and addresses a very deep question about Jewish identity in America. There's an idea from social scientist Charles Liebman about the way Jews in America see this opportunity. One side sees themselves as Jewish Americans, where their American identity is emphasized and they also are Jewish, while the other side sees themselves as American Jews, who are Jewish people and also part of American society. So that's what I want to explore here today. I want to see how the movie American Pickle tells this story, and I also want to discuss the references in this movie.
Just a little bit longer. Please.
The story is about a man named Hershel Greenbaum, a Jewish immigrant to America in the early 1900s, and the man who falls into the vat of pickles. The movie is told to us in two parts. The first part is getting to know Hershel's backstory, and the second part is about the relationship that he has with his great grandson, Ben Greenbaum.
Greenbaum? 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 Greenbaum?
In the beginning of the movie, we're actually given a hint to the fact that Herschel is going to be pickled, and that is the bog, this marsh in the town that Herschel and his wife would love to spend time at and think about the future. A bog is a very unique type of marsh or wetland. Because of its natural conditions, it has a lot of acid, which creates this material known as peat, which is used in farming, and when it's left over a long period of time, peat turns into coal. But the high amount of acid also allows bogs to preserve human and animal bodies. In fact, Northern Europe is known for its bog mummies, people who have been found in bogs. Now, I'm not going to show you pictures of bog mummies. If you want, you can search that up for yourself. I do think it's cool that we are directly told that it is a bog, since that is the type of feature that is known to have pickled humans throughout history.
When we want to be alone, we go to very special bog.
Before I start overanalyzing this detail, let's move on to the town where Herschel comes from. Herschel comes from a town called Schlupsk, and although there is an actual town called Schlupsk in Poland, in the beginning of the 1900s, when this story takes place, Schlupsk was part of the Prussian Empire, which is modern-day Germany, essentially. The city of Schlupsk is bigger compared to the small town, the shtetl, that Herschel comes from, and also did not experience the wave of pogroms that are depicted in this movie the way shtetls in the Russian Empire would have experienced. The truth is that Herschel's character draws a lot from another very famous Jewish character from Eastern Europe, and that is, of course, Tevye from Fiddler on the Roof. And if you line up Herschel and Tevye, there seems to be a lot in common. Live in a shtetl? Check. Wood houses, dirt road, lots of animals? Check. Beard? Check. Hat? Check. Jewish dancing? Check. Pogroms with Cossacks? Check. European accent? Check. Immigrating to America? Check. Okay, I need to stop overanalyzing this. Let's move on.
Bloodthirsty, Jew-hungry Russian maniacs, drunk from work.
I think the fact that Herschel wakes up 100 years later, unlike most Bog mummies, comes from a story called Rip Van Winkle. Now, you may have heard of the story as a kid, but the original was written by Washington Irving in 1819, and I highly recommend you check out the original online. It's a short story that you can read or listen to yourself, and it takes place in New York State in the Catskill Mountains. The story is about a man named Rip Van Winkle who is walking through the mountains and meets these strange people and drinks some of their liquor. Next thing he knows, he wakes up, but it's 20 years later, and he returns to his town and sees how much it has changed. His wife has passed, his children are now grown, and he also missed the American Revolution. And in American Pickle, Herschel wakes up in the future, his wife and children have now passed, and he has missed a century of Jewish integration into America. The second half of this movie deals with Herschel's relationship with his great grandson, Ben.
Ben Greenbaum, you see me now on your television box. Well,
There are a couple of elements in this relationship that I want to bring out, but I think it ultimately has to do with this question of Jewish identity, and it's related to the immigrant story. Ben is a fourth generation American and a millennial, while Herschel is from 100 years ago and has very much the same mindset as he did back then. And there's this added element that there's this, well, in Herschel's perspective, overnight explosion of technology.
Anyway, I can't wait to show you, like, the future. There's so much cool shit, man. You're gonna love it.
And we could see how Herschel is introduced to this totally new world when he has his Rip Van Winkle moment. First time when Ben comes to pick him up from the hospital, and the second time when Ben takes him through downtown Brooklyn to show him the world as it is constituted today.
Hey, nice clothes. Is that vintage?
These scenes really remind me of another movie about Jewish immigration to America called Hester Street, which I covered in a previous episode. In the movie, one of the main characters, the husband, goes to Ellis Island to pick up his wife and son, and then later takes his son to Hester Street to show him what America is like. At the time when Herschel arrived and during the story of Hester Street, the pickle industry was absolutely booming on the Lower East Side. At its height in the early 1900s, one street, Essex Street on the Lower East Side, by itself had almost half of the pickle vendors in the entire New York City. Another place where you can see a remnant of the booming pickle industry of the Lower East Side is another movie called Crossing Delancey, which we'll cover in a later episode. In the movie, the main character's love interest is a man named Sam Posner, who runs a pickle shop on the Lower East Side, which has been in his family for generations, and the shop is called Posner's Pickled Products. Say that 10 times fast. There's a reason why this profession of pickle salesman is central to this question of Jewish identity and integration into America. When Jewish immigrants were first arriving to America, like the characters in Hester Street, Sam Posner's grandparents, or of course Herschel himself, they were looking for absolutely any type of job they can do, including selling pickles on the street. We can see another aspect to this. For example, in Hester Street, we can see how multiple people lived in a very small apartment, and people slept in the kitchen, which they called a lounge. But by the time we get to Ben Greenbaum's apartment, it's much bigger than the tenements Herschel remembers, and there's only one occupant. And this is able to happen as a result of the rising up of Jewish immigrants and their children in America. Each generation tried to make sure that the following generation was able to attain a profession that was able to pay higher, and that way they were able to rise in status. We could see evidence of this in the film when Ben is telling Herschel about his son and grandson and the progression of the types of jobs that they held.
He was the foreman of a brick factory.
the foreman.
That's Mord's son. He was an accountant.
This question of integration goes beyond simply making money or getting a good profession. It asks a very deep question of what does it mean to be a Jew in America. In the shtetl where Herschel comes from, there was not a lot of options, and there was only one way to practice Judaism, as it was bound by the tradition and also the oppression of outsiders. In America, Jews were now given a new opportunity, not just for material security, but to shape this new country as equal citizens. And so now we begin to answer this question of, is it Jewish American or is it American Jew? And what exactly is the difference?
Herschel will help. Do not worry.
Go away, Herschel.
We can see this play out in the movie in the different ways that Ben and Herschel deal with tragedy and mourning.
I am very sad. The world has changed. Everything I know is gone.
When Herschel wakes up 100 years later, he's lost everything. And after the initial getting to know the new world phase, he now wants to mourn what he has lost in the way that he knows how.
But now we go to shul. We say Mourner's Kaddish, prayer for dead. Must properly honor memory of Sarah, Mort, your parents.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's something I want to do right now, but I would be happy to walk you over there.
Ben is not such a fan since he did not grow up as religious as Hershel.
I understand why you're a religious person. That makes sense. Someone from your era, but I am not. I'm not very religious.
You do not know Mourner's Kaddish?
Not anymore, no.
How do you grieve for dead parents if you do not say prayer for dead?
Ben is a Jewish American. To him, dealing with tragedy and his Jewishness are two separate things. But to Hershel, he is an American Jew. He is familiar with and lives in America, but he deals with tragedy through his Jewishness.
You are raised Jew.
Yeah,
Are you not still Jew?
technically. I also had a Jumanji-themed bar mitzvah.
It's not like I was that religious in the first place. Also,
And this is why the motif of the cemetery and of mourning in general is central in this movie, since it helps us see the tension between the integration mindset that Ben was brought up with and the traditionalist mindset that Hershel still has.
Sweet Hashem. You let them put garbage.
To Hershel, first of all, the cemetery represents success.
Als ik zo opzol in mijn eigen matzeil.
Grand Sarah's wish. A beautiful Greenbaum family plot for us to share. Forever.
But it also allows Hershel to connect to his past, the people he has lost, and the dream that he had for them to be successful in America.
I make this vow. Our child will be strong. And our child's child will be strong. Our family will prosper.
And so when Hershel sees the gravesite in total disrepair, this doubles his pain and gives an extra meaning to the prayer he says for those he lost. Eventually, this tension leads Ben and Hershel to start competing, and Ben tries to sabotage his great-grandfather. Now, Hershel wants to make money really for one reason, in order to restore honor to the family's plot in the graveyard.
We start pickle business is good business, Jewish business.
And he achieves this American dream at first by dumpster diving and using rainwater.
it's $4 for pickle. $3 less than big store, and I include discount.
But eventually, at the end of this drawn-out conflict, Hershel needs to be deported, but shaves off his beard and causes Ben to be the one to get deported back to the hometown of Schlupsk. And just as a side point, this reminds me of yet another Jewish film called The Imported Bridegroom, where there is a whole segment where a Jewish immigrant to America returns back to the shtetl, and there's a whole scene that takes place in the shul back in the hometown. In American Pickle, Ben returns to the shul not to meet people he once knew, but because he has nowhere else to go. He enters the shul and is approached by one of the members of the congregation.
You are Jew?
Yeah?
We are need 10 Jew men for make minyan, for Kaddish, prayer for dead.
This is, of course, ultra convenient for the point of the story, but that point aside, Ben reluctantly agrees to join the prayer service, and through that experience, he is able to connect to where he came from and also mourn for what he lost. And we see that when he starts to also recite Kaddish, the prayer that is said by people who are mourning.
I've lost some people.
Who?
My parents.
And it's right after this experience that Ben notices that Hershel, who shaved off his beard, had followed Ben from America to Schlupsk once Hershel realized that Ben was trying to honor the memory of his late parents. You see, Ben was working on this app called Boop Bop.
91. These kale chips are going to be extra delicious because I know how ethical they are. Thanks to Boop Bop. Boop Bop. Boop bop, yeah.
Hershel realized that Ben used to call his parents Boop and Bop, and so when he was making this app, he wanted to find a way to honor their memory, and so he named it after this childhood name that he gave his parents. This is a powerful moment because Ben and Hershel are now able to see from each other's perspective. Hershel realizes that Ben was mourning his parents in, I guess, an American way, and Ben was able to mourn what was lost to him by saying the Jewish prayer. But let's take this one step further. This also has to do with Hershel's American dream. When Hershel first arrived to America with his wife Sarah, he made a promise to her.
Our family will prosper, and in 100 years, the Greenbaums will be powerful.
But because of the conflict between the two of them, when Ben thinks of his great-grandmother,
She probably wouldn't be too psyched to see who I am.
but once they begin to see from each other's perspectives and share a common ground, Hershel tells Ben,
Sarah would be proud. I am very proud. You make my vow come true. You are everything I hoped family would become.
At first in this movie, pickles represent traditionalism, while technology represents modernity in this larger tug of war about integration of Jews into America. But by the end of the movie, where the two sides are starting to converge into common ground, Ben makes the following suggestion to Hershel.
People love your pickles. They do. They do. Can't get enough of them. He's the brine. He'd make people go crazy. And I, I'm good with the internet, good at building websites, things like that. So I thought maybe I can build a website. We sell your pickles. People all around the world.
Family business.
Yeah, family business.
And another symbol that further supports this idea in the movie is the Statue of Liberty. When we first see the Statue of Liberty, it's when Hershel and Sarah are coming over to America, and this represents their initial dream and working towards success. The second time we see the Statue of Liberty is after Hershel learns that Ben is not so religious and doesn't want to mourn the loss of his parents in the same way Hershel does, and so it represents their divergence, this conflict. And the third time we see the Statue of Liberty is when Hershel and Ben return from Schlupsk back to the United States and have now come to an understanding and are going to build their online pickle business. And so this is the closing moment of the movie, where we can see how the movie resolves this tension between Jewish American or American Jew. It shows how Ben and Hershel are focusing on what they have in common, the story of where they come from, and their shared hopes and dreams for the future. And so, once again, we find ourselves here, where we get a heartfelt message from a pretty silly comedy. Thank you for being here to the end of this video. If you enjoyed this perspective on movies about Jewish life, then welcome to Yiddish Kino Club, where we cover one movie each week. If you live in New York City and want to get a feeling of the pickle shops from the Lower East Side, you can check out the Pickle Guys, which are the last remnant of the booming pickle industry from 100 years ago. And if you're interested in Jewish history, I recently put together a walking tour of a Jewish neighborhood called Borough Park, which you can check out here. Next week, we're looking at a movie that also deals with tragedy, loss, and mourning in Schindler's List.